So this video will be on exploring cultural dialectics. The below listed items are the 4 variables used to distinguish cultures. And these cultures, in turn, affect how we communicate with other people. So the first criteria is on individualism versus collectivism. Individualistic cultures are cultures in which individual goals are stressed, while collectivistic cultures are cultures in which group goals are stressed. This means that individualistic cultures are more concerned about developing a sense of self when communicating, while in a collectivist culture, its emphasis is more on fitting in with a group. So, what are examples of this? Typically, Western cultures, like in the US and in Europe, they are more of the individualistic culture. It's more about expressing your own identity, who you are, through what you wear, and even the directness in communicating. Usually, people coming from individualistic cultures are not afraid to be direct because their goal in communicating is to show who they are, and being offensive or not causing an offense towards the person they're communicating to or talking to is only secondary. The primary concern is how do they express themselves most effectively. With people who belong with a collectivist culture, the primary concern is more on how do you fit in with the person or the group that you are communicating with. How do you not cause an offense? What's the appropriate way of talking to that person? That's more of a collectivist form of a culture. And this is very common in Asian cultures, from the Arabs to East Asians, even Southeast Asians. So that includes Filipinos. For example, tayong mga Pilipino, when we communicate with somebody coming from a different culture, we try first to understand where they're coming from because we are afraid to offend them. Unlike yung mga Americans, they're very flamboyant and they are very proud of who they are. So when they come to a country, yes, they try to learn their culture, but it's more of, this is me, I am an American, this is how I express myself. Parang ganon. Okay. Second variable is the high context versus low context. High context communication is a tradition-bound communication system which depends on indirectness, while low context communication is a system that encourages directness in communication. Okay. For members of low context cultures, they try to gather background information when meeting someone for the first time. Like, they would ask you, where do you live, or where did you go to college, who do you work for, and this is deemed to be not offensive. But for high context communication, being asked those questions are deemed to be offensive. In high context communication, they try to be it's more of, it's less on words because they are indirect. So it's more non-verbal communication. It's also, there's a focus on propriety, and being loud is considered to be, or talkative is considered to be rude. While in low context communication, being talkative is okay. In the Philippines, we are a low context communication country. We like to be direct. We ask newly formed relationships or newly introduced people. We ask them, "Oh, where did you go to high school or where did you go to college? Ah, you have the same last name as ganito ganito. Do you know him or her?" Stuff like that. We tend to get to be very personal, and we tend to talk about ourselves and our experiences a lot. And this also is very apparent when students are answering questions during recitation. Diba? Base kasi ma'am sa experience ko, ganyan, ganyan, ganyan. That's a very low context communication style. The next is high power distance versus low power distance. High power distance cultures are based on power differences in which subordinates differ to superiors, while low power distance cultures believe that power should be used only when legitimate. Okay. This is also very common when you go to your classes. Kahit hindi ngayon, because you're first years, there's a difference between how certain teachers handle their classes. Some of them will be very strict with the role that they play as a teacher, and the students parang okay, parang may pader dyan. There's a wall between the teacher and the students that cannot be crossed. Dapat very formal. That is high power distance cultures. But for low power distance cultures, these are usually teachers who are willing to put down the wall a little bit. Meron pa rin boundary, of course. There's a limitation there. But they are more willing to reach out to students, to talk to them personally, to make jokes in class. Those are low power distance cultures. If this was a face-to-face meeting, my class would be an example of a low power distance culture. This is because I believe that when you're teaching purposive communication or any linguistics and communication subjects, it is imperative that the students be not afraid to talk, to speak in class. For out of fear na ma-reprimand sila, or they don't have enough confidence to talk. The class should be a place where you form the confidence of the students to communicate in either English or Filipino, but just to communicate as efficiently and as effectively as they can. And I believe that high power distance cultures is not very effective when you are teaching subjects like communication and linguistics. Okay. So, may difference yan. But, it doesn't mean na yung high power distance is in itself bad. There are many situations where high power distance cultures is it's more applicable. Okay, that there really should be a boundary. Okay, masculine versus feminine culture. Masculine cultures value aggressiveness, strength, and material symbols of success, while feminine cultures value tenderness and relationships. Okay. What does this mean? Why is it called masculine and feminine cultures? This doesn't mean that if it's a masculine culture, that it's automatically a patriarchal society, and if it's a feminine culture, it's a matriarchal society. It's not about that. It can be a patriarchal society, meaning ang head pa rin is the males, but it's practicing a feminine culture. An example of this is our very own country, the Philippines. We are a feminine culture. Although we value aggressiveness, strength, and material symbols of success, generally in interpersonal communication, we value tenderness and relationships. That's what we value more. But we are a patriarchal society. Still value the male role in society. We still think of them as generally as mas mataas kaysa sa mga babae. But we don't like yung pagiging aggressive. We don't like to be upfront and confrontational. We're not very confrontational people. Okay? As much as possible, aaregluhin natin yon. Okay? We would like to have negotiations, compromise. That's a feminine culture. Okay? Yung mga masculine cultures, I would say that the US is a very masculine culture. They're more assertive. They value strength in communication. For example, if you're dealing with them in a business, a firm handshake is very important to them because that already signifies the strength of your conviction when you are making business deals with them. Okay. In the Philippines, that's not so much the case. What we like to do when we are dealing with businesses with other Filipinos, it's more about we like to deal more with people we know, people who are related to us, our cousins, our uncles, our brothers and sisters. It's very filial. Okay? It's within the family. And then, kahit sa business, even at the office, we tend to value how that person relates to the other people in the office. Sa masculine culture, it doesn't matter. Kung assertive ka, but you get things done, even if you offend other people, that's acceptable. So those are the differences between masculine and feminine culture. So I hope you understand the different cultural dialectics. If you have more questions, please send your questions to the GC or through your BDL or through my email at rodavivavila@cnsc.edu.ph. Thank you.